Hi folks, in this video we're going to be talking about fact checking, and especially when you don't have time to do it. So in this video we're going to go over, and a little bit of this will be review, but we're going to go over some of the types of misinformation and how to debunk it, and really what to do about misinformation in terms of fact checking. When we hear fact checking, we often think of a long, complicated process and writing a paper, and that's really not the case. Fact checking can often take 5 minutes, and sometimes even just a couple of clicks to quickly know that something is, wrong about the information that you're looking at. And one important part of fact checking is knowing how in depth do you have to go? What's the scope of it? If you're just looking to see if something your crazy uncle posted on social media is actually true, that might take just 5-10 minutes. But if it's for a more professional purpose, that's going to take a little bit longer because you're going to want to find more sources that you know are credible, legitimate, and will prove the point that either something is true or not true. So going back to earlier in the semester, the definition of misinformation, which is just really false or inaccurate information and getting the facts wrong. Now, misinformation isn't always, malicious. Sometimes, even professional journalists, as we looked a few weeks ago, can often get the facts wrong. What makes a journalist still a good journalist when they get the facts wrong is how transparent they are, and if they um, immediately send in or write about corrections to something that they had posted. I often get asked, what's the difference between misinformation and disinformation? And to review, we went over this a little bit very early in the semester. Disinformation is a coordinated campaign. There's intent to spreading misleading, false, inaccurate information. Um, so we're going to go through a couple of videos from the News Literacy Project. They do a really good job of very briefly and concisely going over misinformation, some elements to look at, and um, you know, why reinvent the wheel. So the next few videos are very, very short. They're just a minute or two. So we will pause, and so you could look at those videos and we'll pick back up.
An inflammatory GIF of a prominent student activist goes viral following a shooting at her school. An alarming image of a shark swimming on a flooded highway circulates after a hurricane. An announcement offering people of colour a free coffee following a racial incident at a Starbucks in Philadelphia. Do you recognise any of these? Which ones are real? Actually, none of them are. They are all false in one way or another. My name is Claire Wardle. I've spent the majority of my career analysing misinformation and why we tend to believe and share stories that are untrue. We've all been fooled by a story or post, only to learn that it wasn't real. But if we share that information, we can wind up unwittingly contributing to the pollution of our digital environment.
So this survey is completely optional, but it's just something that I'm curious about how you think misinformation affects you. And it's anonymous, um, it's optional, but typically when this survey is given to the general public, not necessarily just students, um, about half of the people feel that misinformation affects them either somewhat or very much. And actually, a very small percentage says that it doesn't affect them at all. So even though it shows that's just because I'm logged in. When you click on it, it will not show any of your identifying information. So we're going to watch another quick video. This is just a couple of minutes long, going over some more information about misinformation.
When you hear the term misinformation, you probably think of the phrase fake news. During the 2016 presidential campaign, the term referred to a specific type of misinformation, made-up stories deliberately designed to look like articles by legitimate news outlets. But the term fake news quickly lost its meaning as it was used more broadly in several misleading ways. For example, politicians around the world started to use fake news to describe coverage that they just didn't like. And soon, the term became so watered down that it lost all meaning.
That's not what I hear on Fox News.
No, it's not.
Fact-checked you.
It's
Yeah,
not. But since you brought up fake news,
fake news.
Fake news.
In lumping together all manner of misinformation under the term fake news, we also lose out on some important distinctions.
I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
I believe that it's time to just stop using this term. So in this lesson, anytime I need to refer to fake news, I'm going to bleep out the word.
So we're going to go over a few types of misinformation. So first is satire, which uses humor or kind of absurd exaggeration to mock something, make fun of it. Saturday Night Live is a great example of this. Often they'll have a weekend news update where it's a parody of a news report, and they make fun of events, mock people, and it's typically quite funny. But it can also be taken as misinformation, not necessarily Saturday Night Live, but other types of newsy reports that might be satire, but it looks so genuine that it often gets confused like that, that it might actually be news. A great example of this is, and we'll get into this when we go over conspiracy theory and conspiratorial thinking, is a conspiracy theory of birds aren't real. And it was completely satirical, but people bought into it because it was so real. And the person who created this, I wouldn't call it a movement, but who created this group really went all out in creating social media accounts, a blog. They have merchandise. They have like fake emails to prove birds aren't real. They've been interviewed by press, and the person who created this thing, I guess I don't even know what to really call it, this conspiracy theory, he never breaks character. And he never breaks character to the point that you really don't know if he's serious or not. I mean, he's not serious, but he gets you close enough to where you're thinking, is this guy for real? And not so much in the respect that birds aren't real, but in that he believes fully that birds aren't real. So we'll go into that conspiracy theory a little bit later, I think maybe even next week. False context. False context is misinformation that takes a quote or social media post and makes it appear to be something it's not. We see this often lately with videos. They'll slow a video down so a politician's speech is slurred, or they'll edit a video where if they tripped, they'll stretch it out so it looks like they're perpetually tripping more than they actually did. Or they'll take sound bites and say, this is what politician A believes, when the statement was part of a larger story, not just that statement. So we often see that a lot in partisan politics, with attack ads, and especially nowadays with social media, finding that now that we have software that can go frame by frame, finding that most awful frame of the enemy politician, where they look the most horrible and, using that as part of the attack ad. Manipulated content. This is when information's altered from the original. You find this a lot in photographs. So often we see really cool photographs of like animals being friends, and a lot of times it's it's a doctored photograph. There's a couple of examples we'll see later on in this video that we'll go into, and you might be saddened to find out that some of even you might not have realized that some of the photos that you've seen aren't real. There's some links to watch, just very short clips of more information on these types of misinformation. Okay, imposter content. That's when somebody takes a well-known person or brand and creates content that's supposed to be directly, or looks like it's supposed to be directly from them, but it's not, hence being an imposter. It's meant to fool people, obviously, and it's really just meant to fool people into believing that it's genuine, authentic content from the brand or person. And then fabricated content. This is just really a lie, flat out meant to deceive. This is going into disinformation, and it's it's just meant to deceive. So this link right here will take you to a Google Sheet where there's a 10-point quiz. It's just 5 questions. It should be really easy as long as you've gone through the last 2 slides. And we'll pause right here, or you can keep going and take the quiz after. It doesn't really matter when you take it. And I will see you on the other side.
So what's the point of all this misinformation? Well, it's hard to say because, as you've seen, misinformation happens in lots of ways and for lots of different reasons. Sometimes it's spread to gain followers. Other times it's shared to get people talking about a given subject. And sometimes false information is shared as a joke or by mistake. These kinds of posts may have unintended negative consequences, but this isn't the primary goal. Another type of misinformation is more calculated. It's created with the intention of causing harm in one way or another. And this is called disinformation. Those who create and post disinformation usually target specific groups of people to achieve some kind of goal. For example, they might be trying to influence people to vote in a particular way. Sometimes the goal is to misinform people, and sometimes it's to sow confusion. This can create a fog of uncertainty, so people just don't know whom or what they can trust. And when you don't know what to trust, you stop believing in the idea of truth altogether. Now let's tackle our second key question. Why should we care about misinformation? I mean, who cares if this picture of the Earth or this celebrity shot is authentic or not? Yeah, it's interesting and awesome and fun. Well, it matters. It all matters. Misinformation is like pollution. It affects everyone in the entire ecosystem. Even if you are careful not to share false information, other people do. And that can eventually have an effect on you and the people you care about. How? Because misinformation can influence not only our thinking about important issues, but also our decisions and ultimately our actions. In Myanmar and in India, for instance, rumours circulating on social media have led to violent protests and even attacks on people. Misinformation that starts online can have devastating consequences in the real world. You've probably heard about the Russian disinformation campaign in weeks and months before the 2016 US presidential election. Major social media platforms released evidence of campaign interference activity by individuals and businesses in Russia. Federal investigations have led to the indictment of Russians and Russian entities that were allegedly behind this effort. Let me break it down for you, focusing on the facts. The Russian disinformation campaign sought to deepen social divisions in the US and aspired to help the election chances of Donald Trump, the Republican candidate for president. By posting fraudulent content about divisive political issues, such as immigration and social injustice, this campaign aimed to pit conservative and liberal voters against one another. False content creators, otherwise known as trolls, working for businesses linked to the Russian government, flooded social media platforms with disinformation, much of it targeting the Democratic presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton. This kind of disinformation campaign is actually a form of information warfare, a propaganda tactic that changes as our information technologies evolve. And this disinformation doesn't just stay on the platforms where we find it. It jumps from one online platform to another. It follows us into our homes and classrooms. It becomes the focus of our conversations with friends and family members. So there are several very good reasons why we should all care about misinformation and disinformation.
Now, one thing to think about is how misinformation can affect others. And this is more than just, we're talking about feelings or being upset or telling lies about other. When a significant number of people believe something, there's almost always emotion attached to it, but sometimes there's also consequences to it. So look at some of these examples. You can pause this video to read them, but think about, and this is just a thought exercise on, some of these have, actually been used and were caused problems, and some of them are more theoretical, but um, you know, often we share something that gives us a visceral reaction. Um, and sometimes, you know, it's not just we shouldn't spread, we should think about what we post, not just to not spread false information, but it has consequences and can affect others and can spark chain reactions. We'll pause the video one more time to watch a quick video on misinformation and consequential what can happen.
This brings us to our last question. How can we fight back against misinformation? Well, the first step is to learn about it, which is what you're doing right now. This will help you remain skeptical so that you'll regularly check information for accuracy. And soon you'll be able to recognize misinformation when you see it. Not just so that you aren't fooled by it, but that so you can speak up and warn others not to fall for it. That's one way to clean up this online pollution, by alerting others to stay away from false information and to push back with facts. Now that you know these 5 different types of misinformation, you're better prepared to spot them when you see them. As you browse through your social feeds and explore stories online, think about them. And over time, you'll begin to see telltale patterns, and you'll develop an internal set of red flags.
Okay, so another something to think about. These are examples of manipulated content. They're, it's very easy to manipulate photographs and images that we see online. And these were all manipulated with easily with, basic photo editing tools that you probably could find on your cell phone these days. So what do these images have in common? And what are they trying to create in, or the effect that the creators are going for when they make these edits to, or manipulated edits to photos, and in turn will end up posting them. Some of them, I'm not too sure about the 2 photos on the right, but the 2 on the left are actual photos that have been published in news articles, but that's not the clearly, Michelle Obama did not hold up that sign exactly saying that. And so another something to think about, these are examples of manipulated content, and they're beautiful. They're what makes them appealing? What makes you want to believe that these are um, true unadulterated photographs of, in this case, mostly nature? For me, I think it's just the idea of how beautiful nature can be and how powerful weather can be. And, there's some really crazy things that you can see in nature. Um, for me, also, the frog riding, I think that's some sort of beetle, scorpion, probably a beetle. It's kind of like, I don't know if they're predator or prey of one another, but it's nice to see living things who are different getting along. So what makes them appealing to you? And this is the last video for this part of the lecture. I'll pause it and then we'll pick back up.
So now, do you understand why I really don't like using the term news? It covers up all of the important differences we just explored. And I'm really glad you're learning about this now, because our information landscape is only going to get more polluted if we don't all join the effort to clean it up. Not only is information moving faster, making it easier for people to accidentally spread bad information, but the tools to create fakes are becoming more sophisticated. Artificial intelligence can now be used to mimic a person's voice and facial movements. Check out this faked video of Barack Obama made with artificial intelligence. It literally puts words into his mouth.
It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources. It may sound basic, but how we move forward.
Artificial intelligence can also be used to make fake digital pictures that appear real, like these images that look just like real people but were actually created using a computer program. But here's some good news. You can make a real impact. You have instant access to a global audience with social media. So whenever there is something that you think the world needs to be aware of, you can let everyone know. Just make sure to check it out first. It's up to all of us to push back against misinformation. We need to fight to clean it up because it truly matters to our communities, the nation, and the world.
So now that we've kind of taken some time to review misinformation and looking at the types, this is important in fact checking because you want to know what you're looking at. And for example, if you see something that's obviously to you satirical, why spend time fact checking it? You know it's satire. Unless you're trying to show somebody else, then maybe you want to go more in depth into it. And we're going to go over some tools that you can use to help you quickly fact check information that you find online without doing any real extensive research to gauge whether or not information is worth your time or worth reposting. So a lot of these skills are, just simple digital verification tips. Some of them you might already even know and don't realize that it's part of fact checking. So I mentioned this earlier in the video, but one thing that's really important is to look critically at the source. It's very important to look at the author and who are they? Have they published anything? What's their reputation? The currency of the content. Do you need it to even need it to be current? Sometimes when we're looking at information, it's better to have historical. Can you see or read any apparent biases or agendas? If it's viral information, is the poster, the author of the content. And the reason why we really want to think about these things is that this can help determine which quick fact checking tools you should use, and also how in depth you need to go into your fact check. Sometimes just a little bit of informal planning can help you quickly realize, where to go to first, so it's even, you can fact check the information even more quickly. So some tools to help are Whois and Domain Dossier. And these are tools to help find out who owns a website domain. And seeing who owns a website domain can be very helpful because it'll tell you if there's a potential agenda. For example, if you're looking at information and you're questioning its legitimacy because it sounds a little partisan biased, so you look up real quick. All you have to do is type in, or for both of these, to keep this video a little shorter, I'm not going to go into all of the, demonstrate all of the tools, but it'll help you, if you type in the name of the source that you're looking at and find out it's a super PAC of a political party, well, that can tell you right there that you might want to dig a little deeper, that there's clearly an agenda of a partisan super PAC who raises a lot of money for political parties. Whois is a little bit, you won't have as much luck with Whois, partially because they offer a service to mask who owns a website. And why you'd want to do this is because it'll help with keep, if depending, some people who write content don't want their personal addresses known. They don't want to be personally identified for whatever reason. So they create a mask of providing their address as the address and name for the website owner. And also it helps prevent spam from accumulating to the user, because if you don't mask your website, it'll likely show your personal email address. And that just can lead to tons and tons of spam into your inbox. Domain Dossier is a little bit, it's a lot, proves a lot more fruitful in finding, especially if there's an established website that's been around a while. So that's one way to quickly find out, and it can be part of a more substantial fact check, but you can find this information or not find it a lot more quickly than doing extensive digging on a Google search. The Internet Archive. This is a website history over time, and it really is quite an extensive archive. Basically, it sends out crawlers all over the web, and this gets into above my pay grade of how they do it. But basically, they help the internet remember and immortalize things, web pages, social media accounts, on their platform. People can also upload to it. I know in Ukraine, there's a huge effort by librarians to catalog through the Internet Archive databases of their library catalogs and images and online archives, because if their servers get destroyed, that information might be destroyed forever. They also won't have a reference point to recover objects, books, and that sort of thing. But because the internet is so extensive, we have to tell the internet to remember those particular websites. The Internet Archive has just tons of information about, so why would this be helpful? Well, you can see how a person or company's um, evolution over time, what they've said they've stood for, if they've types of practices they've engaged in, or ingredients in their products. So it's just a way to learn more information, more historical information. It also, when you hear about a famous person tweeting something that they delete right away because it's offensive or absurd, or just not true, and a lot of times it's not totally deleted because the Internet Archive captured it. And when a lot of famous people, I don't seem to realize that um, the Internet Archive has tools that help it remember every single tweet of um, of people who are famous and newsworthy at the time. So, for example, Donald Trump, the Internet Archive has every single tweet he's ever posted um, before he was eventually suspended from Twitter. So that's all on record. So it's really a great resource, and I recommend checking it out. You can often find books uploaded there that are hard to find, and it's just got a lot of cool and odd sometimes content. So Twitter account that verification. Um, Looking at imposter content, often uh, people will take the name of a celebrity before they can, sign up on Twitter, or before they become famous. Their name is already taken. Again, Donald Trump is a perfect example for this. When he signed up for Twitter, um, at Donald Trump was already taken by a satirical um, account meant to be a parody. So his name became at Real Donald Trump. Um, Make sure that there's a blue check mark with tweets, so you know that's the actual person tweeting it, and not uh, imposter content, or um, somebody's trying to manipulate something with a Twitter screenshot. And why this matters is that there's a whole process to get verified on Twitter. And it's not just, checking a few boxes. You have to show legitimate proof that you are who you say you are. And I've enclosed the link right here if you want to know how to complete that process. The read this or links to pages in your textbook. It's very short, because it's a ebook. Some of them are just even half a screen length, so that gives some even more details of it. And again, when you're looking at Twitter, whether it's on the actual platform or a screenshot of something, look at the start date. Did they start it just a few days ago, or have they been on Twitter for quite a long amount of time? The older the account, generally, the more trustworthy that it is the person that they say it is. Followers. This isn't always a great metric, as I'm sure you're all aware or have at least heard. Twitter uses a lot of bots to make it look like it has more followers, or people have more followers than they might actually do. And that's a little out of my scope of knowledge. But that's why it's not always a perfect metric. But it does indicate popularity of a person. So if you're looking at a celebrity, we can even use Donald Trump again. If the account is, an imposter account of him, and they only have like 36,000 followers, well, then that indicates that's likely not the account that you're looking for. Previous tweets. does it align with the age of the account? Or, do they only have a few tweets? And, even if the account's older, but the celebrity account that you're looking at has 2 or 3 tweets, that's usually indicative that um, something is off. And it can also be, not just celebrities, it could be universities, it could be, think tanks, different survey groups, all trying, and often you see them, imposter content or manipulated uh, and just made up stuff um, from accounts that you really, when you really look at it, it's only been around for maybe 6 months and has just, maybe 10 to 20 posts and, 1,000 followers. That's probably indicative that they're not really out to post the most legitimate content. Fake screenshots, and this is what I was getting at. It's very easy to generate something, but as we can see here, there's no check mark. So this isn't the authentic account from Barack Obama. If you're actually on the platform, you can usually hover over their name, and it'll show the amount of followers. But PolitiWhoops is part of what I mentioned in the last slide, part of the Internet Archive that will have tweets of deleted people. And how they capture them is, they're always paying attention. They always have their, crawlers and web things. That is out of my scope of knowledge how exactly it works, but they are perpetually recording. And I use recording not in a literal how I'm recording this video, how they can capture essentially screenshots of everything that gets posted. And the web doesn't forget when, especially if you're a well-known figure or celebrity or institution, chances are somebody is paying attention perpetually to your account. So that mean tweet that you send out will get seen. Searching Google by site. So when fact checking, well, in a few slides, we'll go over this part. Sometimes just doing a simple Google search can help you search laterally to see other sources that are publishing a claim. But you can get information about an indexed site and the date of the page, because the date of the page will also help build credibility and authority. If it just was a website that popped up, a week ago, chances are you might want to at least question it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not legitimate, but you definitely want to question it. So you're just going to want to, in your site, in your search, you're going to want to put in quotations site : and then the URL to the or the search term, and it will bring back the site dates. So that's just one tool to help you determine age of a website. You can, and using this tool, you can set a date range with the search results, so it'll only send you, especially if you're using this with just a generic search term, you can cap how many results you get by setting a date range. Using Google Books to check quotes. Also, quoteinvestigator.com is a great place to fact check quotes by famous people. And why do I put this in here? Because often we see memes. Voltaire was a famous one that has recently got circulated where he didn't actually say what the meme said he said. It was actually quite the opposite of his thoughts and philosophy and publications. So this is an example used in your textbook, and you can search through. This is a different example, but you can search through in the Google search engine. You click on books, and you can find, if not the whole book, excerpts from it. So, and at least with the quote that you're looking for. Also, make sure you're looking at the right version. Clicking on more, clicking on settings and tools, you can change the version site. So you're getting either the most current version or the correct one that would have the quote. Journal impact factor. This is more into scholarly research, but it can help, especially with misinformation related to science and health. A journal impact factor is how often the journal or specifically a journal article has been cited in other journals and journal articles. So this has a limited meaning. A lot of scholars, especially those who have to publish a lot, this score means a lot. And so if you're going to use this, it definitely indicates that it's being cited, and experts and scholars and scientists or whoever is whatever the discipline is, it's being looked at, it's being cited, but it doesn't say the purpose it's being cited. So the content can also be cited because it contains bad information or bad research, or so it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're looking at it, particularly an author, based on their publication's journal impact factor, it doesn't always mean that they're high quality information. Example that can be found is, I forgot the doctor's name, but he was one who published that vaccines cause autism. His is the original journal, which you can still find on it. The Lancet redacted it, but it still has a journal impact factor, and it's very high because other sources have referenced it as a debunked or discredited research when talking about their own in that field. And also, if you find, if you're using this to a journal impact factor to determine credibility, look at, is it a peer-reviewed journal, or has the journal article specifically been peer-reviewed? Has the science been replicated if it's a science, or has the research in general been replicated? I think it kind of goes without saying that there's no magic tool that will tell you exactly if something's legit or not. Well, actually there is, but we'll get to that later. But if you're doing the fact checking on your own, there's no one thing that can tell you yes or no. But there's a combination of different tools can give you a definite confidence that something is or is not true. Reverse image search. So there's a couple of ways you can do reverse image searches, and I'm going to show you a few of them. This is just a short screen capture of using Google Images, and you can click there, and it will take you to Google Images, and you can upload or drag a file to the search bar, and it'll search that image in its database, and it will let you know if there's other pages with it. And this can be important in fact checking, because if somebody claims that they took a certain picture or it's a real picture, well, you can find the original picture or by looking at the similar photographs to determine if a photo is manipulated or not. TinEye is another great way to do a reverse search. You can pretty much do the same thing, and there's even a browser extension to help you use it. But this will help trace some of the identifying information on where the photo was found originally, or who took the photograph, who created the meme, and that kind of stuff. And then you can also right click on an image. We earlier in this video, the Hindenburg was part of a fact-checking question. So how can we tell? And obviously, if it's on History Channel, it's likely true. It's a legit photo. It's not doctored or anything like that. But where did they get the photograph? So we can right-click on it and then search with Google Lens. And then you will come to a screen similar to this and click on Find Image Source. And it will bring you to where this image is also found. Now, I point to a YouTube video, but that's really just because it tells you who captured this footage. And it's actually part of a black and white reel-to-reel that color was added to later. So highly viral stories, if you go to BuzzSumo, it can show you different topics that are viral or are trending, and it can guide you to other information about the same topic that can help you judge whether or not a viral piece of information is legitimate or not. Promoted tweets. Often there'll be some sort of, and this is particularly you see in election cycles, claims about candidates of what they believe or they don't believe, or what they want to do or don't want to do, and it's actually a paid ad, and so make sure you look if there's a tweet that is questionable and it's promoted. It's likely biased, or not true, but that doesn't mean it's always not true. Sometimes it's just an ad advertising something, but in this case it's not really telling you that drugs are dangerous, but it's kind of giving the impression that that dangerous drugs are being imported, which of course they are, just common sense, that happens. It's meant to kind of be a scare tactic, and it doesn't really tell you anything about what's being imported. And it's trying to tell you that your senators are thinking about voting to not, or they're not even going to look at, stopping dangerous drugs from being imported. And so this is a promoted tweet. So obviously it's a group trying to, create an emotion on the politics of a random senator. Okay, fact-checking sites. So going back to when I said there's no single thing that will help tell you yes or no, that there are fact-checking websites that can help you, but sometimes the information you're looking for isn't going to be listed on these, and a lot of times these fact-checking sites are for news articles, and they often go over viral viral memes and tweets and so other social media content, but sometimes you're not going to find it on here. All Sides, I've mentioned earlier, is a very extremely good fact checking site. Um, it labels everything, and it even rates the bias factor of the article, the review, analysis. I don't show it in this video, but if you click on one of their fact checks, they often, who wrote it, they'll say the bias of the writer of the review, whether they lean center, right, left, and they're very, very transparent. Snopes, that's a famous one. They're often viewed a little bit more to the left of the political spectrum, but they're still a very legitimate fact-checking site, and I'll show you why in just a second. When you're using fact-checking sites, it's important to keep in mind where are they getting this information? Do they bother to look for their original source and are able to show you their original source? Are the links to those sources legitimate? And do the links work, even the tiny insignificant ones? And the whole point of showing sources is for the reader to be able to reproduce the same research that whoever wrote the fact check, that they can find them and make their own conclusions. And this is from the same, these are the sources, and all of the links work. I checked myself. And so in this case, you can easily retrace their steps on how they made their conclusions. You don't necessarily have to agree with it, but they're being transparent in how they came to that conclusion and why you should come to that conclusion as well. Now, I wanted to show a bad fact-checking website. And I redacted a lot of its identifying information just to take away biases of, just the classes, collective, and also so I'm not viewed as I'm imposing my own views. This one is actually a left-wing, very left-wing, apparently, and I use air quotes, fact-checking website. They have a lot of news articles, and I use the term news loosely, but in the disinformation tab is where they do their fact checks. And their about section versus All Sides is completely different. They have no, they don't say how they come to their conclusions. They don't say any biases or any methodologies that they use for fact checking. So, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could probably easily find out who it is, but, and we're gonna, so another thing to look at when we're fact checking is whether or not social media posts are promoted. And this is an example from Twitter of a promoted tweet. And clearly this is a mock political ad intended to make people think that their senators are at risk, or are not trying to solve the problem, that patients are at risk for being exposed to unsafe medications. But if it's a promoted tweet, chances are that there's some sort of agenda from a party, and I don't necessarily mean a political party, but in this case it likely is, but that's not necessarily the case. And there's a vested interest in it. So when somebody has or paying and has a financial interest in really anything, often approach it with some questioning, because when there's money involved, there's usually an agenda there. But that's not always the case with promoted content. Sometimes they're just trying to boost it so you see it more, or they're advertising a product or whatever it could be. So, but it's good to remember to look for signs that it is promoted or it says an advertisement, so that you're not sharing um, information that's not intended to be information. Sometimes they are, and something like this might be intended to share as um, legitimate information, and sometimes it's promoted and it's not intended. It's intended to be what it is, an advertisement. So, but that's looking for that sign is a good way to judge whether or not you should dig into something a little bit more. A little bit on fact checking sites, which is one way that you can often get a definitive yes or no answer. But we're going to compare some of the larger known fact checking sites and which ones are, the ones to go to over others. So All Sides, I've mentioned before, is a very well-known, very thorough fact-checking site, also in identifying political biases, and they're very transparent, and they label everything, and how they determine something is far left or center or far right or right of center. They are open with their methodologies. So legitimate fact checking, everything is labeled and disclosed. Snopes is a very well-known one. It's often viewed by some as very left-leaning, but I haven't found that the case, as far as being way to the left. And I'll show you why in a second. But references is a big thing to look at, not just in fact checking websites, but really in any information that you're looking at. Are they posting references to their claims? And which references are they claiming? Not all references are, hold the same weight of credibility. And that's something that's important to when you're looking at a source's reference is, can you trust that reference that they're using? And sometimes it's hard to tell. But questions you want to ask yourself is, do they find the original source? Who, what, where, when, is the site referencing? Who are the sources? And all legitimate fact checking sites will have cited sources. They'll even give like the insignificant ones, where they found out a tiny fact. They'll provide that as well. And really the point of references in anything, but especially on fact checking sites, is for a reader to be able to reproduce the information and draw a similar or the exact same conclusion. So these are the sources from the story from the previous slide, and all of them work. And for this purpose, a lot of the sites are Facebook, and but that's because the post is about Facebook, so that makes sense. Sometimes Facebook references aren't going to hold the weight that they should, so that's another thing to consider. Here is an unnamed fact-checking site, and the reason why I leave it unnamed and I've taken out quite a few of the identifying factors is because I don't want that to lead to any preconceived notions, even though you can definitely tell that this is a very left-wing fact-checking site. I wouldn't recommend using this as a fact-checking site. But I've redacted some of the identifying information, so it wouldn't generate that kind of visceral depending on, and it may not generate any emotion, but it's really just to kind of focus on the content versus who it is. And if you really wanted to, I'm sure you could easily figure out the website. And I posted a link to a fact-checked article from this source, but it just goes to a PDF file, which I've also redacted some of the identifying information and more of the things that would create. Sometimes it's not even the wording that can give the perception of bias, it's the website itself. So you can compare different articles from, you can either use this lesson or, do something on your own. But you can see the difference in the quality. Transparency, I've mentioned before, All Sides is very transparent. It identifies its own biases in its articles. And it shows how it comes up with its media ratings. You can look at the methodology of how they come up with their fact checks and how they rate different media organizations. And back to the unnamed fact-checking site, where's the references? Where are the sources? Here's another legitimate fact-checking site, factcheck.org. Here we have all of these sources. Most of them are, or a good bit of them, are primary sources. They're going to the exact case number. You know who wrote it, it's when they wrote it, and all of the how they got their information is very, it's they don't hide where it is. And this is the end of an article on our other fact-checking site, no sources listed. So how do we come to that conclusion, that the conclusion the author of this article came to? How can we make sure that that's how can we verify it for ourselves? And some of the words are linked that take you to other links that it's not very helpful. It just brings you to other content within the website. So when a fact-checking site doesn't provide their work or is using language meant to generate a visceral reaction or says that's not true without any supporting evidence, usually that's not a good sign that it's a legitimate fact-checking site. So checking upstream. This is some more strategies to fact-check information. So checking upstream is basically when you come in contact with, let's say, a social media post, you look to see where the original poster got the information. So are they saying that they themselves took the photograph, or are they, or they saw something, or they're reposting a screenshot of a tweet? So going upstream is really kind of fact-checking the information. It's using information clues in the information that you're questioning to decide whether or not the information that you're looking at should be considered legitimate or authoritative and whatnot. And some of the elements of fact-checking, and this is very formal kind of speak, but it's important to kind of just note these two elements. And one of them is lateral reading, and that's just basically reading other information about a topic and comparing what is said about it. This is particularly useful, but when you come into contact with a news story, do a quick Google search, see what the other news agencies are reporting along with that. If the news site that you're looking at is saying one thing, but everybody else is saying another, then you might want to dig a little deeper and see what's really going on. There's a page in the textbook that's really helpful and has some really other noteworthy ideas about lateral reading. Critical observation, and this is really, it's not something that you're almost going to really think about, do like, oh, I'm going to critically observe this. It's really just looking at the information in question and gathering data about it, and and by that I mean looking at small clues that can tell you or help you look for what it is behind that piece of information. You can notice differences when you're comparing the source you're looking at, and if you laterally read to another source, what's the differences, and looking at accepted data, comparing it to, and by data I don't necessarily mean necessarily numbers or statistics, just information, another way of saying information. And it's really just critical thinking of the source that you're looking at, and seeing what's important when you want to fact check something, seeing what's important, and being able to kind of throw out the irrelevant stuff to fact check it. So going upstream, it also means following a piece of content to its original source. So remember syndication. Often we can go to the New York Times website and look at an article and it says from the Associated Press or from Reuters or published in Axios. So, if we stumble across a photo, and let's just say this is the photo, we can right click on it and reverse image search it and see where that takes us. And then maybe it takes us to one of these sites, or the New York Times, which takes us to one of these sites. And, I'm just kind of making up stuff, but it's basically looking at where a piece of information came from, what preceded it, and going back as far as you can until you've gotten to the source. And sometimes it can be difficult to do that, especially if something's been shared a lot of times, or made, like the viral content we looked at last week with the my God meme that went viral for going on, was it now like 12 years? 12 years later, it's still viral. So, if you're coming across, someone came across that to find out where it originally came from, that can be a challenge to go that far back to finding the original source of where that photograph came from. So we use the term credible source a lot. A lot of professors, especially librarians, use credible source. But what does that even mean? And it's, years ago, I probably would have said sources that come from information that comes from sources that have been established for a long period of time, that have been long-term trusted. But in recent years, a lot of those sources have become questions of distrust, and they're not as easily trusted as they once were for various reasons. So, a slightly different definition of a credible source, and what really makes a source credible is that it takes steps to verify and help its reader be able to verify for itself the authority on a subject. Credible sources aren't always perfect. No, if a human being is writing it, chances are they're going to make a mistake at some point. Maybe not in most of the authors of a newspaper. They most of the time get it right, but they're human beings and they're going to get it wrong sometimes. And like I've mentioned before, what do they do when they get it wrong? Do they apologize? Do they make a redacted statement. What do they do in that instance? Do they try to cover it up? So when a source is obviously trying to show that it took steps to verify, where they make a claim and they say they confirmed with person A, who verified it with person B, and they found journals and notes that the person said this. So, they didn't just say it's been reported that person A said statement A. When they say, especially in news, when a reporter says confirmed by, who's confirming it? Would that person or thing or other piece of information, would that actually confirm definitively that a statement is true? Credible sources are typically independent, meaning that the information isn't influenced by money or politics. If there's a direct financial stake, as I mentioned earlier, they're generally viewed as less credible than others because money talks. If there's a financial interest, often there's, you want to question its authenticity. Now, you could argue, well, aren't all news organizations and media out to make money? Well, yeah, of course. However, it's a little different in, the New York Times, Washington Post, the really big names that have been around for 100+ years. They have a reputation to uphold. So even though they're out to sell newspapers and to make money, they're also have nobody's going to buy their paper if they lose their credibility in their sourcing, in their editorial process, in their ethics. So, and if they're, if I don't know who owns the New York Times, but Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, owns the Washington Post. So if the Washington Post is writing a story about Amazon, there's a little bit of a conflict there. In the same way, is Jeff Bezos hovering over the newspaper saying, you need to print this, you need to print that, you can't print this, you can't print that? Then there's some ethical issues in that. But if he just owns it and just lets it be a newspaper with its ethical standards and it's how it's going to run, how it runs, and adhere to an editorial process regardless of the stories it's going to print, then that's a little different. So of course, all media companies, all newspapers, all social media companies are trying to sell something, but at the same time, it's all about the reputation. Some news sources are just trying to get clicks and are trying to sensationalize stories, and that's what they do. And they're not known for that. So really looking at a source's reputation in an independent mindset, not just what one person says or another. With you looking at the content that we talked about over the course of this class, their ethics standards, are they published? Their writers, what are the history of their writers? That will really make a credible source credible. So these are two sources. I've linked them so that when you're looking at this at home, it might be a little bit easier. For the purpose of this video, where I'm going to skip over that video, and we can put that you can pause the video, me talking, and watch the video. But while we're talking about financial interests, we have an article that is about wind turbines that are made by GE, and the article is published by GE. And then we have about GE's wind turbines published by CNBC. So which one is more credible about wind turbines? Well, of course, it's going to be the CNBC article because, I mean, there's no, GE doesn't have any, it doesn't benefit GE to give you the cons. Of course, they're going to give you all the good stuff about their wind turbines and what it can do and how it can benefit a customer. CNBC, they're more likely to publish the cons and the pros and the cons, or maybe just the cons. Maybe it's a terrible product and GE should go back to the drawing board. So, okay, we can pause real quick for another video. So this is another uh, example, and the articles are linked that you can click on. They're talking about a Chinese rocket that debris lands was falling from the sky. One's from the People's Republic of China, one's from Reuters. And which of the three explain why Reuters is more credible? So the People's Daily is a government-run news organization, and it's not independent. So it's not going to those satellites are typically government-run by any country. So it's not going to publish, it's not likely to publish content that views the country in a negative light. Also, Reuters has high standards for accuracy, fairness, and independence. It has a reputation for doing that, and it rarely comes up in the news as not being independent. So those are two sources of to compare of interest in which is going to be more credible about a topic. And it's also important to remember that it depends on the question too. If you're researching about Chinese state media and how they view things, well, of course, then the People's Daily might be the more credible source because it's the state media. So it really, in certain cases, the less credible source in one question can be the credible source in another, which just makes things that much more confusing. And this video is going to go over real quick other elements to look at in evaluating the two sources we just looked at. So we're going to end here. I just thrown out a ton of information. This was a video that was on the longer side. But really, it's important to know just some basic tools so you can easily fact check something that you see on your social media and newsfeed. Now, this video was well over an hour, but only because I'm going through different tools kind of extensively and talking about them. Right-clicking on an image to do a Google image search to go upstream on an article, well, it'll take you 3 seconds. And a lot of times it just takes 5 minutes to um, make sure that what you're sharing isn't, fake news or disinformation, and that, or even if you're not sharing it on a social media platform, it's something that you are, if it's some for a more professional purpose, you want to make sure that for whatever that purpose is, it's legitimate, credible information. So that's it for now on direct fact checking. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about conspiracy theories and research at the library, which is more formal, I guess you could say, fact checking. But this isn't the only week we're going to be looking at elements of fact checking. But this is the basics. And in conspiratorial thinking, we're going to go over more of the mindset of what makes conspiracies attractive, and how to debunk those with some of the tools that we worked with um, in this week. So if you have any questions, of course, email me, and I hope you all have a good day. Bye.